These are Nebraska corn farmers. They work in acres, not hours, harvesting the energy and climate solutions the world needs. We are proud to stand with you.
The success of tomorrow's soy industry depends on the actions we take today. The future is here, and the time to move is now.
Market Journal Television for Agricultural Business Decisions is a presentation of the University of Nebraska Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources in partnership with the Nebraska Rural Radio Association. Promotional support provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine and partial funding provided by the Nebraska Soybean Board and the Nebraska Corn Board.
Hello everyone, I'm Alex Makovica. Thanks for joining us today on Market Journal. Bryce Doeschot is out on assignment this week. We've got a lot to get through on today's program, including a new connection to Nebraska Extension's TAPS program called Master Irrigator. Bryce Doeschot caught up with Central Valley Ag's Luke Beckman earlier this week to get his 2 cents on the current market trends. And as always, Eric Hunt standing by to give us the latest on the weather. All that and more is coming your way. But first, earlier this week, the Market Journal crew had the opportunity to document a conversation between UNL's Dean of Agricultural Research Division, Derek McLean, and plant breeding and genetics expert, James Schnabel. Aside from leading the crops research here at the University of Nebraska Lincoln, James is also the Nebraska Corn Checkoff Presidential Chair. The duo discussed the value of UNL's research plots and how they're benefiting Nebraska's corn producers.
So James, tell us a little bit about some of the research you've been conducting and what do you see going forward?
So I'm actually very excited as we go into this fall. We've been successful in securing some new support for my program through both RPE, which is the energy equivalent of DARPA, funding advanced breakthrough research, as well as the National Science Foundation. With RPE, we are looking at ways to use gene expression data, so measurements of the RNA in the leaves of corn plants like the ones behind me, to predict how corn will perform in new environments to help guide our breeding decisions. This is something people have thought might be possible for many years, but nobody has had the funding and the capacity to do the large-scale research necessary to find out whether or not this would work. We're going to find out over the course of the next year. At the same time, we were fortunate to receive some funding from the National Science Foundation, working with one of my colleagues at Iowa State University, part of the AI Institute for Resilient Agriculture, and a professor of computer graphics at Purdue University, whose background is actually developing the digital plants you might see in video games, using those same sorts of procedural models to model entire cornfields and be able to predict if we start making changes to the geometry of the cornfield, the inter-row spacing, the arrangement of corn plants, as well as the genetics of the corn plants. For example, the properties of the canopy, how many leaves a corn plant produces, the width, the length, the angle, how that's going to affect the efficiency and the productivity of cornfields. So we can simulate hundreds of thousands or millions of possible combinations in a high-performance computing environment using digital twins, and then test the best ones in the field. Because even at a large facility like Havelock, we can test dozens or hundreds of possible combinations. We cannot test millions.
That's really amazing. I'm just trying to put all this together. So you're basically taking information that you're gaining from the leaf at the cell level. And is this like an artificial intelligence or AI type of application?
Yes, so we're actually working with some collaborators in the private sector who are developing AI models that can make predictions from that gene expression data, the molecular properties of the leaf, to say how well would these corn plants perform at the end of the year, but also how well would they have performed if they were grown in different environments.
So then you can actually scale that up and then use that information to help our producers that are farming at thousands of acre type of scale. Is that right?
That would be the ultimate goal, is to be able to look at new varieties of corn and say which ones are going to do best on your farm in this year, and at mid-season, what do we think the crop is going to look like at the end of the year? Because if growers have a better sense of that, they can make better decisions in terms of how to hedge their prices, how much to sell to the pre-sell to the market, and also what fertilizer applications, what it makes sense to invest in the crop during the year.
Sounds like a great application, because I know our producers are constantly trying to make decisions. They're making a decision between seasons, during the seasons. So this also helps them potentially with their profitability and bottom line. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, that's something I've been really impressed in the 10 years I've been here in Nebraska. Nebraska farmers are making very sophisticated decisions. The more data we give them, both the more profitable they're going to be, but their profitability tends to also translate to more efficiency. So we see that as a double win. Our farmers make more money, we get more grain, and we're putting less nitrogen and water down on the field.
So it's also really also about sustainability,
Yes.
natural resource sustainability, and then also inputs.
That's been my experience. The more and the better data you can get to farmers, the more sustainable their practices are going to be.
Because we hear a lot about these opportunities that are happening. And now would this AI, these digital twins, help us also? So for example, in the development of the sustainable aviation fuel or SAF fuel, or other types of directions that farmers could go?
So that's a very good question, and that's something where I think we need a lot of data. Some of it has to come from the farm, some of it still has to come from the federal government in terms of how the carbon scoring for sustainable aviation fuel is going to be considered. If we see a policy where farmers are rewarded for better practices and their crops are given lower CI scores, that's going to really shift the whole market for sustainable aviation fuel. It's going to unlock a huge amount of additional demand for ethanol on an ethanol to jet pathway, and that would really be a game changer for Nebraska farmers.
I know that is a potential game changer, and I know the Corn Board appreciates the ability to work with you and your expertise in these areas, and also all the scientists we have here at UNL that can work in that space. And I think it's also really great that we're out here today at Havelock Research Facility. I mean, we have, we're one of the few places in the United States where corn is actually grown on the UNL campus.
Yes.
But then if you need to do something maybe a little larger at a larger scale, more commercial, you come out to here to Havelock. Tell me a little bit about how that works for your research program.
Yeah. So my program combines a lot of genetics research with agronomy research. So if we are growing a few plants to make seeds or doing something where we're going to be touching the plants every day, that happens right on East Campus where my students can just walk over to the field. They don't even get in the car. But if we want to scale up a little bit, do something that's a little bit closer to a production level system, we can come here. It's only 15 minutes from campus, and we can grow really large commercial scale experiments as well as really large replicated trials. I have some trials growing over there that we're photographing from space because we're able to see that level of resolution. And we have a wonderful farm team here that is using the same equipment that you'd see on a commercial farm.
So this is an opportunity again, so you can rub shoulders with producers.
Yes.
That you can say, we're farming right next to you.
Yes.
We're experiencing the same type of challenges and opportunities that you experience.
Absolutely, and I would just also emphasize it means that my students, many of whom are not coming from agricultural backgrounds, are out here experiencing what it is like to be on a commercial scale operation. I think that makes them better geneticists, better data scientists going forward, having that hands-on experience.
Having that opportunity to understand what it's really like to be out in the field on a daily basis.
Yes.
And thanks to James and Derek for their time and giving us some insights into how research here at UNL is impacting the state's producers. We'll have more from Derek and James next week as they discuss a new company derived from the research conducted at these fields. It's called Dryland Genetics. You won't want to miss it. Moving on, some educational opportunities are coming right around the corner for cattle producers that they should mark on their calendars. Market Journal's Bill Dodd standing by with more information. Bill?
Thanks, Alex. It's no secret that Nebraska is one of the top cattle producing states in the U.S., and that's one of many reasons there's a long-standing history of Nebraska Extension working directly with cattle producers across the state. Now, last year, the University of Nebraska launched a new extension program to further help cattle producers optimize heifer development and reproductive efficiency. With the U.S. cow herd at historic lows, the University of Nebraska Lincoln is focusing on how to grow the cow herd while advancing the quality of female genetics that are the foundation of the U.S. beef industry. The Great Plains Heifer Development Center at UNL's Haskell Ag Lab near Concord was launched last winter as part of that effort. The program gave producers access to a variety of different tools and information and is wrapping up its first year of operation.
These are often things that they have the abilities to do themselves, but sometimes it's just difficult and time consuming, and ranchers aren't long on a whole lot of extra time. So anything that we can do to help them out and pull that data so then we can evaluate it and compare it to the cattle here in the upper Midwest, and basically use it as a learning opportunity for everybody involved in how we can advance the females within this industry and have less fallout of younger cows and allow those cows to have greater longevity within these herds.
For those who are interested in learning more about this program or are considering joining, you'll have an opportunity to learn more about this program in person. Coming up next week on October 2nd, Nebraska Extension will host an open field day at the Haskell Ag Lab near Concord from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Attendees will have the chance to hear from some of the program's partners and participants about their experience, a tour of the Heifer Development Center, and an in-depth look at data garnered from the first year of operation. Also coming up in the month of October, ranchers and land managers can learn all about forage, production, stocking rates, and managing risk during an interactive online learning experience provided by Nebraska Extension. A 6-session webinar focused on the basics of knowing, growing, and grazing grass will begin on October 14th through the 31st.
I think the highlights of it is really the resource materials and then the opportunity for people to interact around the topic. So first night, we're going to ask folks to come prepared to talk about what are some main grasses they have on their plate. So we're going to ask them to send us pictures of grasses they have, or actually just bring grass samples from the pasture, talk about them on camera. Then we're going to take that and really transition into understanding, okay, now that we know that, how do we understand what's the productive potential of your situation or where you're at? So looking at things like web soil survey to understand based on that soil type, precipitation, forages that should be there, what could you expect to grow under good to excellent conditions? And then we're going to start to talk about, okay, now that we know that, how can we develop a grazing plan that matches what you have with what you want to harvest from there with the grazing animal? We're going to focus primarily on cattle, but it could be sheep, goats, some other livestock as well. And then we're also going to just talk about, as you think about understanding your grazing plan, what are things that could impact that? Things like drought, frost. How do we adjust that to make changes when we need to adjust the grazing we're doing to make sure we're managing that grass in a way that's sustainable, maintaining it, or improving it if there's opportunity to do that.
If this seems like an opportunity you would be interested in, the time to register is now. The deadline to register is October 1st, and that'll be here before you know it. The cost for the webinar series is $100 per person. Each webinar will be recorded and available online to registered participants after each session. Now, if you have any questions, you're encouraged to reach out to Aaron Berger directly. You'll find his information at the bottom of your screen right now. And we'll be sure to post some helpful links along with this story on the Market Journal homepage. Back to you, Alex.
All right, thanks, Bill. To stay in the know about future events like this, make sure you bookmark Nebraska Extension's event calendar. Just do it on your favorite browser. Well, it's time to turn our attention over to the markets. Earlier this week, Bryce Doeschot caught up with Central Valley Ag's Luke Beckman to see what's catching his attention in the markets as harvest kicks into full swing across the state. Here's their conversation from Wednesday afternoon.
Joining us now on Market Journal to discuss the latest happenings in the grain markets is Central Valley Ag's Luke Beckman. Luke, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming back to the program.
Bryce, great to be on. Thanks for having me.
Well, in general, corn and soybean prices seem to have bottomed out in the month of August and have gradually been going higher. How do you attribute the kind of our climb here as we roll through the month of September?
We really got into the September crop report and we saw, larger yields on the corn side, and we saw smaller yields on the bean side. And I think since that point in time, it's almost been a sell the rumor buy the fact type trade in the corn market, despite record supplies forecasted on the balance sheets. And seasonally, we typically try to find some sort of pre-harvest low on either side of Labor Day. So not uncommon to see corn and soybean price strength as we get into harvest. I think as you look at seasonals, the month of October is not a terrible month to corn or soybeans in large carryout years, where we've seen some modest price strength during that month. So exciting to see managed money continue to cover some of those large short positions that they've held, particularly in soybeans here just in the last 3 to 4 weeks. They've been pretty aggressive in terms of doing that. So we've seen some nice price rallies. It's given producers a good opportunity to get some harvest time sales on and position themselves a little bit better as we get into the meat of harvest.
Let's dive a little bit deeper into some of the factors influencing the commodity trade on the corn front, Luke. We've got a report coming out on Monday. Tell me about that report from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, what traders are expecting and how it could influence the markets.
Bryce, that's the September quarterly stocks report. That's always a pretty key set of data that we get from the National Ag Statistics Service. We get these 4 times a year, as the name implies, quarterly. The September one's pretty important. It's been impactful a lot of years. We get some surprises for a couple of reasons. It's the final measure up that we get that the USDA will then basically make as their carryout numbers for the 23-24 crop year. We've seen large surprises in this report in the past. Corn, particularly the last several years, we've seen bullish surprises from this quarterly stocks report as we see a smaller carryout represented when we see the numbers. No guarantees that's what we see Monday. As a matter of fact, pre-report estimates are expecting that we do see larger supplies or a larger carryout, larger stocks number in the Monday data. Same for soybeans. So we'll see what it says. Essentially for the corn market, what it's doing, that final measure up helps us imply what the fourth quarter feed and residual number was. It also helps us finalize the crop size from last year, the 23 harvest, excuse me. It'll do the same thing in beans. We'll get a final crop size and any adjustments that we need to see, most likely to the residual category on the soybean balance sheet. But it's a big step forward in terms of price discovery because it allows us to put the 23-24 marketing year to bed by finalizing the crop and also giving us a good look at what feed and residual demand was for the year.
And that information again coming out from USDA next week. Luke, let's talk about something else influencing the markets. That is the South America weather conditions. What's catching your attention on that front?
Well, Bryce, we had mentioned that managed money had been aggressively covering short positions, particularly in soybeans, since late August. And South American weather is certainly a key contributor to that. We look at central Brazil, one of the driest stretches they've had, their soil moisture profile really driest they've been in 30 years. And what that does is it delays the planting of their soybeans. Those producers want to see soil moisture before they plant soybeans so that they have adequate germination for that crop. And so they're just sitting and waiting. Now, we're not late by any stretch of the imagination as far as soybean planting goes in Brazil. They've got a lot of time, a lot of latitude on getting that crop sown. But with the size of the short in the managed money position, in soybeans, I think it created maybe just enough concern that maybe we should cover some of these positions, put some profit in the bank, rather than have all this risk exposure if in fact we do see a drought really intensify in Brazil. So it's something that we're watching. An implication for corn also is that if this soybean crop gets planted late, what it does is they harvest it later. And that can impact the second crop corn that gets planted in February. If things get too late, they will forego planting the second crop corn as drought late in the year, which would be like our springtime, May, June, would adversely impact the production potential of that safrinha corn. So bears watching. We're definitely early yet, but if we get into November and they're still having some issues, I think the market could get a little more excited.
All right, something to watch, as you mentioned, as we go into November. Let's talk about October and the month ahead. In general, what kind of seasonal trends do we see for corn and soybean prices?
Well, as mentioned earlier, we typically have seen in bigger carryout years like we have now, actually, and that may be counterintuitive, that we see some modest price strength, at least flat to modestly higher during the month of October. You're seeing that type of price action since we found some early, maybe pre-harvest lows right around Labor Day. So it's been great to see the price strength going into the early stages of harvest. So that could create some great opportunities for producers who are behind, on harvest time sales. And we've certainly seen that across the system. That's not unique to Nebraska. It's really been U.S. wide in terms of producers being undersold on this year's crop. So great opportunity, good timing of a rally as producers are harvesting and looking to make some catch-up sales. You're seeing a lot of $10 cash offers filling this week with the rally in soybeans. So producers are in a good position here, especially as they know what those yields are. They can complete the revenue calculation on their farm. Yield times price gives them that revenue idea. So we're really narrowing in on, are we profitable? Are we not? And that should give producers some confidence to make some selling decisions.
Again, a big thanks to Luke for taking time out of his schedule to join us this week. And if you have questions you'd like to ask one of our future analysts, just email us or get in touch on social media. We'll be sure to pass those questions along. Well, Palmer amaranth, it's been creeping into fields all across Nebraska. And as Palmer continues to gain more and more herbicide resistance, what can farmers do to control it? Nebraska Extension researchers are addressing this issue and have been working on an integrated approach that incorporates cover crops as one tool in the toolbox. You can learn more in the September issue of Nebraska Farmer. It's time now for weather with Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Eric Hunt. Eric, harvest in full swing across much of the state. So when it comes to those weather conditions, how are things looking for producers in the week ahead?
Well, thanks, Alice. I can tell you what they shouldn't expect this week, and that's much rain, because we're not going to much of any rain in the next week. Speaking of rain, I want to offer a sincere apology to all those of you who got your hopes up last weekend for significant precipitation. That did occur across portions of southeastern Nebraska. We did have 1.5 inches to 2 inches of rain in some spots. Most of us, though, got the shaft. And because of that, not only do we not see improvement on the drought monitor, we saw some additional degradation, particularly here across northeastern Nebraska, where we now have a lot more moderate drought. And we saw some addition of severe drought across portions of Holt, Antelope, and Knox counties. Still a lot of severe drought out in the Panhandle as well. Again, the month of September, it's been pretty dry for quite a while across this portion of the country, but the month of September has been particularly dry in Nebraska and a lot of the north central U.S., with the top 4 or 5 driest September so far, probably going to end up being the 3rd or 4th driest September statewide. Soil moisture, again, we did see some marginal improvements across portions of southeastern Nebraska last weekend where we saw significant precipitation. Most of it, though, we are bone dry in the top part of the profile, and actually this is worse off than not only last year, but also worse where we were at this point in 2022 as well. Sensible weather this week, not much to speak of. A strong cold front will come through on Monday, not bringing any rain, of course, but we will get a lot of wind behind it, particularly across northwestern and north central Nebraska. And with those dry soils and low relative humidities, there's going to be relatively high fire danger in this part of the state on Monday, so just please take that in mind. In terms of the rest of the week, there will be another weak front moving through on Thursday that will bring a little chance of precipitation in portions of northeastern Nebraska. Won't get your hopes up too high. But for the most part, though, for those of you who are trying to get out in the field and get a lot of harvest work done, this looks pretty good. Not much precipitation to speak of this week. Probably not much to speak of for quite a while. Again, the CPC is reflecting what most of the models right now are showing. That's ridging being fairly predominant across the north central and central U.S. for most of the first part of October. So again, I don't anticipate pretty much anybody in the state getting any significant precipitation until at least the second week of October, possibly beyond that. Temperatures also look to be relatively warm. We will have a chance of getting some frost in portions of western Nebraska on Tuesday morning after the front passes through. And there will be periods of time where it will be a little bit cooler, but for the most part, though, we are going to remain relatively warm going into the middle part of October. Temperature and precipitation around for last week. Again, this 98 Stapleton, 57 Imperial, 28 in Agati, 72 in Falls City. 2.5 inches of rain was the most rain that we saw last week. Thanks. Back to you, Alex.
Finally today, the Ogallala Aquifer, an invaluable resource for Nebraskans. It's also a valuable resource for several other states. That's why the NRCS and other private industry partners are working to expand programs like the Testing Ag Performance Solutions, also known as TAPS, and a new program called Master Irrigator across all 5 Ogallala Aquifer states. It's aimed at helping to achieve sustainability of the aquifer. Market Journal host Bryce Doeschot learned all about it at this year's Husker Harvest Days.
We're visiting now with ag producer from southern Nebraska, Rorik Pullman, as we talk about the Master Irrigator series. Appreciate your time today, Rorik. What is this program?
It's an offshoot out of Texas, out of the North Plains Groundwater District, out of a need for managing at a higher level and reaching out further from an adoption standpoint, from the early adopters and innovators to, how do we reach a broader area of the aquifer, and that's led to moving north and obviously up into the #1 irrigated state in the nation.
What's this look like for the ag producer getting involved like yourself?
We have institutionally a very grounded model in Nebraska with the NRDs and NDNR and the leadership within those and the tried and true understanding of what we need to do and what some of the effects are, and our ability to build on that and then create the confidence and the trust factor of some of these ideas and being able to expand them, I think we're in a place where I think we're really where we can really jumpstart it.
How long has this been around?
Well, I mean, if we go back on the Texas days, 7 or 8 years, Colorado has really embraced it on the Republican side, where they had to retire so many acres just across the border from the upper and the middle and the lower Republican, obviously in Tri-Basin. Colorado really embraced it. I think they're in year. I think I've presented at their since their inception. I think this is 5 years with Colorado. So we're obviously be able to cherry pick a little bit from all of these other states but Kansas is actively engaging, Oklahoma, and I know Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas. There, in Florida, I think there's several others that may or may not be at varying levels. So there's certainly a lot of research out there that figuring out how to get it applied. How do we actually get growers and landowners the value and be able to return that in conservation of our most precious resource in Nebraska, water.
Sounds like a very collaborative program, which reminds me of another one that you're involved in, the Testing Ag Performance Solutions TAPS program based in North Platte. You've got some involvement with that, correct?
Yeah, I helped jumpstart that. It started on a phone call on a Sunday night with Dr. Darren Rudnick. But it is, and TAPS it's a passive learning experiential piece that allows you to really dip your toe in the water, and all the data and all that experience that comes out of that, how do we turn that around and move it to the next layer of producers that may or may not ever have the time or the willingness to participate in TAPS, but could use the tools or have that access to those tools to help their farm be more profitable, but also more environmentally responsible to the water resource.
Mark, based on what I know from you over the years, learning about what you've done, you're a very forward-facing ag producer. A lot of ag producers are doing that, but for somebody who's maybe not getting involved in some of those programs, the Master Irrigator or TAPS, what's your call to action, or what's your why behind why you're doing this?
Well, I'm of the thought that if you do nothing long enough, you get exactly what you deserve. And why wouldn't I want to invest in having a legacy of water that my grandson or my son who runs our commercial operation today, and their ability to not only be exposed to the regulatory, the bodies that are involved in the research and the delivery of those opportunities, so that they can grow and see with that. That's the piece that I see right now. That's going to be the next shift and change to move the needle. Mm-hmm. So that's my time. That's my investment.
That's going to do it for this week's show. And if you missed a story, be sure to follow us on social media to join in on the conversation. We hope to see you right back here next week. Until then, I'm Alex Makovica, wishing you a safe and bountiful harvest. Thanks for joining us.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.